Well, this is Eli Lake's fault. He keeps finding stuff that I just have to. Because it's rekindled my quasi-familiarity with rap. I had this quasi-familiarity with rap, and there were always the smart rap. And you had the few kids just insisting, like, you gotta listen to the smart rap people. And so I listened to the smart rap people because those few kids just insisted on it. There was this kind of smart corner of rap where they rap about the smart stuff. But I'm just looking back at it because of freaking Eli Lake. He just quotes people, and he just kind of finds the worst of the worst. And this is one thing he just brought up. And so I just took the paper trail. But God, this is supposed to be the smart rap. But it's just kind of, the formula is just make a bunch of salacious accusations and don't tell anyone how they can actually confirm what you're saying, but just sneak in as much salacious accusations as humanly possible, and away you go.
Man, you hear this bullshit they be talking every day, man. It's like these motherfuckers is just like professional liars, you know what I'm saying? It's wow.
Right, Immortal Technique. Thanks a lot, Eli. Immortal Technique. I remember Immortal Technique. It was, ooh, my toast is done. It was supposed to be the smart rap. The smartest of the smart, but holy fuck.
Listen, Bin Laden didn't blow up projects. It was you, nigga. Tell the truth, nigga. Bush knocked down the tower. Tell the truth, nigga. Bush knocked down the tower. Tell the truth, nigga. Bin Laden didn't blow up projects. It was you, nigga. Tell the truth, nigga. Bush knocked down the tower. Tell the truth, nigga. Bush knocked down the towers.
I pledge no allegiance, nigga, fuck the president's speeches. I'm baptized by America and covered in leeches. The dirty water that bleaches your soul and your facial features, drowning you in propaganda that they spit through the speakers. And if you speak about the evil that the government does, the Patriot Act to track you to the type of your blood. They try to frame you and say you was trying to sell drugs and throw a federal indictment on niggas to show you love.
A bunch of agencies that track kind of freedom and democratic activity, and all kinds of quantitative approaches to trying to figure out, is there more or less freedom in this era compared to the previous era? Like at this Patriot Act point where just so many people made so much hay of it. But like all these agencies that measure this kind of indicators of freedom, whether by, democratic participation or something else, it's like it stayed stable or it spiked worldwide and even in America. But, this was supposed to be the big turn. We were all supposed to lose our freedoms completely like 22 years ago. And it was going to be this big point from which there's no return. And then people kept saying it was going to happen again and again and again and again. And these people still can't see themselves for, I see them the way I see Immortal Technique.
This shit is run by fake Christians, fake politicians. Look at their mansions and look at the conditions you live in. All they talk about is terrorism on television. They tell you to listen, but they don't really tell you their mission.
Oh, slid past the fake Christian remark, so I just want to replay it again. Something I've been hearing all my life, more so with Christians than with any other types of faith heads, calling each other fake, and usually over these local facts that have nothing to do with the crux of why I think certain Christians should call certain other Christians fake. But let's just play this again.
Drugs and throw a federal indictment on niggas to show you love. This shit is run by fake Christians.
Yeah, fake Christians. Now, have you ever seen it come down to this pessimist optimist dividing line? Like the optimistic ones are being accused by the pessimistic ones of being the fake Christians, right? You'd think at one point or another it would come down to that. All my life long, I've never seen it, even though Christians, more than any other religious group, love to call each other fake, usually for some minutia related reasons, and never for, actually thinking back to, not to be a kind of Bible quote miner or anything like that, but Jesus, you can do this with so many, right? Sorrow is better than laughter, for by a sad countenance the heart is made better. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. It is better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. So it's like you can probably find something, blah, 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 spread and multiply that kind of calls into question. But I think you can find more of this type of stuff. Of course, the newer one, not the Judea one. The Judea one only had the fall as the kind of pessimistic ingredient. And so at some point, as with all the other things, that I'm just waiting for the right kind of debate parameters to kick in. Not for people to hold my views. No, I've long given up on that. But at least for the debate to have these kind of right parameters. As with a gajillion other things, so too with Christianity. You'd think at some point it would come down to this foundational divide and the kind of intra-Christian tension of, is this a pessimistic or optimistic religion? Is it some gray zone between the two, right? If it's not pessimistic, it's because it's a gray zone, not because it's optimistic. So no matter what way you slice it, the kind of Philistinism in America that kind of claims its own Christianity for itself, I think, especially insofar as they claim that, their constitution was inspired, divinely inspired. Maybe fewer of them will say it now, but they've long since felt it. They were just more brazen about it back in the day, right? The American Constitution, it really just does encourage a kind of Philistinism in the way of this pursue riches, pursue happiness, overtly says pursue happiness. And it's kind of, divinity's got you covered in the legal system. Divinity's got you covered. Pursue all the happiness you need. It's like, really, you guys really should just at least do these parts of Christianity the benefit of not intermingling it with your I shouldn't turn this into a America as a place where people go to become Philistines and, comfortable Philistines or Philistines. I always kind of hesitate to use that as an insult because there's two ways to pronounce it and I'm not entirely sure which way to pronounce that I. But yeah, it is my favorite go-to thing. I just see it everywhere. The older I get, I see it in people that I didn't think were Philistines. Even as recently as like a couple of years ago. Now I'm seeing them as Philistines. But yeah, there's a tension. And so if it's not a pessimistic religion, it's a gray zone religion. And I'm just waiting for this to be kind of the dominant debate within it. And it never will be. And it certainly won't be if, kind of rappers get to have their way. And rappers are still very, very Christian predominantly. They're criminal Christians. But, being a criminal Christian is more plausible within the whole context of how the religion is seen by the greater population. Being a criminal Christian is more plausible than being a pessimistic Christian. That's how many fucking degrees of separation there are between intelligibility and what's just out there and what's popular and what grabs the attention. Being a criminal Christian.
This shit is run by fake Christians, fake politicians. Look at them.
So it's just the irony of the ultimate anti-PC guy being the pro-interfaith dialogue guy. The faiths, you can only make progress in these interfaith dialogues. If you actually watch this or just get a transcript of how these things go, you can only get a foot in the door by obscuring things integral to the faith. And I guess he's just, in this weird way, he's become something of a, in his practical dealings in the world, he's become this Borgish consequentialist. He's identified what the good is, and in his outlook, interfaith dialogue is a path to the good. And if it involves obscurantism and out deception, that's a minus he'll gobble up. It's like no, interfaith dialogue should be a meme. The media should treat interfaith dialogue as a meme, and it should just be understood. These people have a hell of a lot to debate, and that's across the faiths. Now, even within the faith of Christianity, this is what really bugs me. Whatever the denominations argue over, they're not arguing over the core thing, right? And so a mighty big chunk of Christianity, when you look into what the early church fathers wrote about, this is kind of true original Christianity. If we want to apply hubris to summarize my position, true original Christianity, you can read about it in the chapter on the denial of the will to live, the chapter by Schopenhauer. He goes into Christianity at length, but really true early Christianity. And he says that it was of a piece with the Eastern contemplative traditions such as Buddhism, Brahmanism, religions that, turn away the will, right? And so that should be like, it's bad enough that there's obscurantism across the faiths in terms of what the crux of the contrary claims they have to get at, to get anywhere. It's bad enough that it doesn't happen nearly as much because of interfaith dialogue mongers, right? But then even within Christianity, right? The main debate should be the debate between the people who say, no, Christianity is about the assertion of the will to live, and those others who can be backed up by the early church fathers and various other, proponents who preach celibacy and things of this nature, which he's got ambivalent views, given what he tweeted about how he's now saying conservatism is about sex. But that's really where the battle line should be drawn. Is Christianity about the turning away of the will or about the embracing of the will? And it's like nowhere within the culture can that even be like on anywhere near the radius of the debate. It's not about the points. It's about just these kind of political attitudes. To the extent that interfaith dialogue takes place and obscures things, it's because it makes it about whatever the political attitudes at the time are, instead of the scripture, what the scripture says.
Now, and then that question emerges, well, what responsibility did the Palestinians bear? Well, then I think we start to touch on more metaphysical issues. It's like, well, the Palestinians, like all people, bear the responsibility to live in truth and to stand up to tyranny in their deeds, their attention and their deeds and their actions. Because if you don't, you pay for that, and so do your children, right? And then so do your grandchildren, and so do your great-grandchildren. And, there seems to be something unjust in that why did the children suffer? And the biblical answer to that has always been, well, the children suffer for the sins of their forefathers. And you might think...
And then there's certain individuals who drew upon that and said, this is a very bad place. And you kind of screech and kvetch anytime someone even comes within, they're kind of dangling something that's close to that, and they're not even touching it, and you start kvetching about genocide. But let me just play them back.
Well, it's pretty so do your grandchildren, and so do your great-grandchildren. There seems to be something unjust in that why did the children suffer? And the biblical answer to that has always been, well, the children suffer for the sins of their forefathers.
And you can even theologically, biblically expand upon that, as many of the OG Christians did. But then having had to, relax the standards, because to successfully proselytize, they had to just be their own. They had to white out some stuff before whiteout was available. And just in terms of what they claimed the contents of the faith were.
And you might think, well, it's pretty unfair that the world is set up that way. It's like, hey, it might be unfair, but it is set up that way, and it does beg the question. What responsibility do the people who are living under the thumb of totalitarians have?
I would have begged a different question, but you went the wrong way. You went this way.
For the fact that they're living under the thumb of totalitarians, and the answer isn't none. So,
yeah, I agree. Palestinians have a non-zero in terms of the onus for them to get their own show in order. It's non-zero. Anyone who says it's zero because of decolonialism should be ignored. But to what extent do individuals who understand horror, world is a bloodbath, to what extent might they have to at least, even if they want to disagree, to at least be honest enough and say, there's these implications of Christianity that people have written about, less so in the modern age, but certainly back in the day, implications of Christianity, and at the core, I don't believe this, but at the core of what we debate as Christians among each other, is this a pessimistic religion or an optimistic religion? Right? And so I don't want to make any kind of ultimate statement here. I've forgotten far more about what the Bible contains than I've remembered since the last time I read it. But, I think this is what the debate should be. I believe that there's a very good possibility that Christianity is, as Schop said, it's a pessimistic religion. I'm going to read what's hopefully going to be a very small chunk of the Doctrine of the Denial of the Will to Live chapter. I called it the Denial of the Will to Live chapter in the clip just a second ago responding to Peterson. No, it's the Doctrine, because it's about Christianity. So I'm going to read certainly nothing like even a full quarter of it. It's a very long chapter, but I do have to just kind of supplement what I was saying with more concrete examples, which are listed here. Let's see, where did I want to start from? Okay, here we go. Now, the Christian myth makes original sin first arise after man came into existence, and for this purpose ascribes to him per impossibile a free will. It does this, however, simply as myth. The inmost kernel and spirit of Christianity is identical with that of Brahmanism and Buddhism. They all teach a great guilt of the human race through its existence itself, only that Christianity does not proceed directly and frankly like these more ancient religions, thus does not make the guilt simply the result of existence itself, but makes it arise through the act of the first human pair. This was only possible under the fiction of a liberum arbitrium indifferentia, and only necessary on account of the Jewish fundamental dogma in which that doctrine had here to be implanted. Because, according to the truth, the coming into existence of man himself is the act of his free will, and accordingly one with the fall, and therefore the original sin, of which all other sins are the result, appeared already with the essentia and existentia of man, but the fundamental dogma of Judaism did not admit of such an explanation. Thus Augustine taught in his books De Libero Arbitrio that only as Adam before the fall was man guiltless and possessed of a free will, but forever after is involved in the necessity of sin. The law, onamas, in the biblical sense, always demands that we shall change our doing while our being remains unchanged. But because this is impossible, Paul says that no man is justified by the law, only the new birth in Jesus Christ in consequence of the work of grace, on account of which a new man arises and the old man is abolished, i.e. a fundamental change of mind or conversion, can transfer us from the state of sinfulness into that of freedom and salvation. This is the Christian myth with reference to ethics. But certainly the Jewish theism upon which it was grafted must have received wonderful additions to adapt itself to that myth. In it, the fable of the fall presented the only place for the graft of the old Indian stem. It is to be attributed just to that forcibly surmounted difficulty that the Christian mysteries have received such an extraordinary appearance, conflicting with the ordinary understanding, which makes proselytizing more difficult, and on account of which, from incapacity to comprehend their profound meaning, Pelagianism, or at the present day rationalism, rises against them and seeks to explain them away, but thereby reduces Christianity to Judaism. But to speak without myth, so long as our will is the same, our world can be no other than it is. It is true that all wish to be delivered from the state of suffering and death. They would like, as it is expressed, to attain to eternal blessedness, to enter the kingdom of heaven, only not upon their own feet. They would like to be carried there by the course of nature. That, however, is impossible. Therefore, nature will never let us fall and become nothing, but yet it can lead us nowhere but always again into nature. Yet how questionable a thing it is to exist as part of nature everyone experiences in his own life and death. Accordingly, existence is certainly to be regarded as an erring, to return from which is salvation. It also bears this character throughout. It is therefore conceived in this manner by the ancient Samana religions, and also, although indirectly, by real and original Christianity. Even Judaism itself contains, at least in the fall, thus its redeeming feature, the germ of such a view. Only Greek paganism and Islamism are entirely optimistic. Therefore, in the former, the opposite tendency had to find expression, at least in tragedy. But in Islamism, which is the worst, as it is the most modern of all religions, or at least it was at the time of this being written, as it is the most modern of all religions, it appeared as Sufism, that very beautiful phenomenon which is completely of Indian spirit and origin, and has now continued for upwards of 1,000 years. Nothing can, in fact, be given as the end of our existence but the knowledge that we had better not be. This, however, is the most important of all truths, which must therefore be expressed, however great the contrast in which it stands with the European matter of thought of the present day. On the other hand, in the whole of non-Mohammedan Asia, it is the most universally recognized fundamental truth today as much as 3,000 years ago. Now, I've not done my research to see if indeed in those non-Mohammedan parts of Asia it was subscribed to. He says universally recognized in all of non-Mohammedan Asia. But nonetheless, those people attain to this perspective. It's very much a theoretical investigation style perspective. And yet, look how they lived. They all propagated their genes as any other populations did throughout all this time. And so it really shows the hollowness of advocacy and that kind of expectation that one's theoretical perspective will alter how one behaves. Maybe it's a bit more of a reasonable expectation nowadays with contraceptives being more available than they would have been back then. But, all of non-Mohammedan Asia, suppose it's true. I've not researched it, but suppose it's true. All of non-Mohammedan Asia, people were these existential doubters, right? Our existence is something that ought not be. And nonetheless, they propagated themselves and their populations like any other population that believed the polar opposite thing, right? It just really shows the hollowness of the idea that, if only we sway people, people will behave differently. No, people are going to behave how they're going to behave, no matter their theoretical perspectives. I guess I just had to go off on that tangent. But you tell me, was it universally recognized, from 3,000 years ago onward? I mean, non-Mohammedan Asia, it's a mighty big chunk of the globe. And yet, it's just people started families and acted like it was nothing. Even though they were, he doesn't use the word existential pessimist, but really it's existential pessimism. It's not just a kind of common pessimism about this or that institution being bad. No, it's an existential pessimism. But, they propagate it. So, yeah. Don't lose yourself in advocacy, folks. People are going to do what they're going to do, no matter what they believe. If now we consider the will to live as a whole and objectively, we have, in accordance with what has been said, to think of it as involved in an illusion, to escape from which, thus to deny its whole existing endeavor, is what all religions denote by self-renunciation. Abnegatio sui ipsis, for the true self is the will to live. The moral virtues, thus justice and benevolence, since if they are pure, they spring, as I have shown, from the fact that the will to live, seeing through the principium individuationis, recognizes itself in all its manifestations, are accordingly primarily a sign, a symptom, that the self-manifesting will is no longer firmly held in that illusion, but the disillusion already begins to take place, so that one might metaphorically say it already flaps its wings to fly away from it. Conversely, justice, wickedness, cruelty are signs of the opposite, thus of the deep entanglement in that illusion. Secondly, however, these virtues are a means of advancing self-renunciation, and accordingly the denial of the will to live. For true integrity, inviolable justice, this first and most important of cardinal virtues, is so hard a task that whoever professes it unconditionally and from the bottom of his heart has to make sacrifices that soon deprive life of the sweetness which is demanded to make it enjoyable, and thereby turn away the will from it, thus lead to resignation. Yet just what makes integrity honorable is the sacrifices which it costs. In trifles, it is not admired. Its nature really consists in this, that the just man does not throw upon others by craft or force the burdens and sorrows which life brings with it, as the unjust man does, but bears himself what falls to his lot, and thus he has to bear the full burden of the evil imposed upon human life, undiminished. Justice thereby becomes a means of advancing the denial of the will to live, for want and suffering, those true conditions of human life, are its consequence, and these lead to resignation. Still more quickly does the virtue of benevolence, caritas, which goes further, lead to the same result. For on account of it, one takes over even the sufferings which originally fell to the lot of others, therefore appropriates to oneself a larger share of these than in the course of things would come to the particular individual. He who is inspired with this virtue has recognized his own being in all others, and thereby he identifies his own lot with that of humanity in general. But this is a hard lot, that of care, suffering, and death. Whoever then, by renouncing every accidental advantage, desires for himself no other lot than that of humanity in general, cannot desire even this long. The clinging to life and its pleasures must now soon yield and give place to a universal renunciation. Consequently, the denial of the will take place. Since now, in accordance with this, poverty, privation, and special sufferings of many kinds are introduced simply by the perfect exercise of the moral virtues, asceticism in the narrowest sense, thus the surrender of all possessions. Okay, so here he gets into the kind of stuff that I did cover in the Stoicism to Cynicism pipeline videos. So I shall skip ahead a bit and resume. Where do I want to resume? The moral virtues are really not the ultimate end, but only a step towards it. This step is signified in the Christian myth by the eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, with which moral responsibility enters, together with original sin. The latter itself is in truth the assertion of the will to live. The denial of the will to live, in consequence of the appearance of a better knowledge, is, on the other hand, salvation. Between these two, then, lies the sphere of morality. It accompanies man as a light upon his path from the assertion to the denial of the will, or mythically, from original sin to salvation through faith in the mediation of the incarnate God, Avatar, or, according to the teaching of the Vedas, through all rebirths, which are the consequence of the works in each case until right knowledge appears, and with it salvation, final emancipation, moksha, i.e., reunion with Brahma. I can't speak to the coherence of the Brahma and the Buddhism stuff, but just in terms of making sense of the, I guess, profundity of the Christian myth, and the fables associated with it, like, to me, just nothing has made sense. Nothing has made sense apart from this transition into this ordinary speak about pessimism and optimism, and what's a stand-in for salvation versus what is a stand-in from for the heathen perspective, the sinful perspective, right? So I understand from a scholarly standpoint, a lot of people can nitpick this. It's a mixed bag chapter, but just subjectively speaking, like, nothing has ever made any of these Christian fables resonate with me apart from this, even though I've tried to see the alternative perspective. Nothing resonates apart from bringing it back down to really the brass tacks of pessimism versus affirmation. The Buddhists, however, with perfect honesty, only indicate the matter negatively by nirvana, which is the negation of this world, or of samsara. If nirvana is defined as nothing, this only means that the samsara contains no single element which could assist the definition or construction of nirvana. Just on this account, the Jainas, who differ from Buddhists only in name, call the Brahmins who believe in the Vedas Sabhiparmaras, a nickname which is meant to signify that they believe upon hearsay what cannot be known or proved. Asiatic researches, blah, blah, blah. Skipping ahead a bit. In the hour of death, it is decided whether the man returns into the womb of nature or belongs no more to nature at all, but blank. For this opposite, we lack image, conception, and word, just because these are all taken from the objectification of the will, therefore belong to this, and consequently can in no way express the absolute opposite of it, which accordingly remains for us a mere negation. This is why it makes so much sense. However, the death of the individual is in each case the unweariedly repeated question of nature to the will to live. Hast thou enough? Wilt thou escape from me? In order that it may occur often enough, the individual life is so short. In this spirit are conceived the ceremonies, prayers, and exhortations of the Brahmins at the time of death, as we find them preserved in the Upanishad in several places. And so also are the Christian provisions for the suitable employment of the hour of death by means of exhortation, confession, communion, and extreme unction. Hence also the Christian prayers for deliverance from sudden death. That at the present day it is just this that many desire only proves that they no longer stand at the Christian point of view, which is that of the denial of the will to live, but at that of its assertion, which is the heathen point of view. It just makes so much sense than any other alternative explanation. But he will fear least to become nothing in death who has recognized that he is already nothing now, and who consequently no longer takes any share in his individual phenomenon, because in him the knowledge has, as it were, burnt up and consumed the will, so that no will, thus no desire for individual existence, remains in him anymore. Individuality inheres indeed primarily in the intellect, and the intellect, reflecting the phenomenon, belongs to the phenomenon, which has the principium individuationis as its form. But it inheres also in the will, inasmuch as the character is individual. Yet the character itself is abolished in the denial of the will. Thus, individuality inheres in the will only in its assertion, not in its denial. I mean, this kind of does pose complications for some of the praise he heaps upon the genius in the genius chapter and elsewhere, which he treats the genius as the kind of solitary figure, the individual. And yet here, the individual is abolished when you abolish the will, I guess even temporarily, which the genius can only do so temporarily when he is at the height of his production. Even the holiness which is connected with every purely moral action depends upon the fact that such an action ultimately springs from the immediate knowledge of the numerical identity of the inner nature of all living things. But this identity only really exists in the condition of the denial of the will, nirvana. For the assertion of the will, samsara, has for its form the phenomenal appearance of it in multiplicity. Assertion of the will to live, the phenomenal world, the diversity of all beings, individuality, egoism, hatred, wickedness, all spring from one root. And so also, on the other hand, do the world as thing in itself, the identity of all beings, justice, benevolence, the denial of the will to live. If now, as I have sufficiently proved, even the moral virtues spring from the consciousness of that identity of all beings, but this lies not in the phenomenon, but only in the thing in itself, in the root of all beings. The moral action is a momentary passing through the point, the permanent return to which is the denial of the will to live. It follows, as a deduction from what has been said, that we have no ground to assume that there are more perfect intelligences than that of human beings. For we see that even this degree of intelligence is sufficient to impart to the will that knowledge in consequence of which it denies and abolishes itself, upon which the individuality, and consequently the intelligence, which is merely a tool of individual and therefore animal nature, perish. And now for an updated version of the audio avalanche complaints, that whole list of complaints. There's an updated version. I just had a disagreeable conversation with a colleague. They tried to take me to task. I'm not going to go into it at length, but let's just say they tried to take me to task. And I just pretty much started thinking about the Randy Marsh South Park episode way back, I think in 2005, called Bloody Mary. You know, the thing that he does at the end, the thing that he does at the end. Glorious, visual, dynamic, adding to the audio, glory. But the best part about that episode is just the kind of the comedic fatalism of Randy. Randy becomes this comedic fatalist because of these, I guess, studies that he reads on depression, where someone sways him, you know, kind of deterministically sways him to be a fatalist in terms of his shortcomings. I think that started out being alcoholism, so he had to go to Alcoholics Anonymous or something, some South Park equivalent of Alcoholics Anonymous. But then someone informed him that, you know, you should be a comedic fatalist, and so he starts being a comedic fatalist. It's a brilliant episode, but it just made me start, you know, I was in defense mode, and I immediately thought of the episode, and everything just fit what I had to say, but I knew none of the colleagues would get it. So they're not based enough to watch South Park, but I went ahead and did it anyway. So I'm being taken to task, and all I say is, knowing no one would get it, but all I say is, but I'm an audio addict though, you must respect my needs and vanity. But I'm an audio addict though, you must respect my needs and vanity. I had a nightmare the night before, not last night, but the night before. I had a nightmare about being involved in a jihadist incident where I'm the Vic. And I didn't realize it until right now, so it's been almost 2 full days. And I didn't realize I had this nightmare about this very topical thing. And I'm like, well, you know, in the interest of full disclosure, not only is it the sort of thing I need to do a audio on now, even though there should be no more audios. I gotta find a way to put myself in the vault. But I realized I gotta leave this audio just in the interest of full disclosure. I said some empowering things
empowering from the standpoint of let's stamp out global jihad if we know how to do it. I said some very empowering things, and I'm Mr. Cognitive as opposed to affective. But now I had this, and I didn't realize I had it until right now. It's almost been 2 full days to getting high to realize I was on the Sky Train, and a jihadist just started blowing people up, and I was just trying to open the door, and the jihadist shot me as well. And I'm like, okay, so this is what it's like to be shot by the jihadist. It's like, well, at least I'm being shot. At least I'm not having my head slit. It was just a morbid dream. But there were numerous of them, but one was specifically in my car. They had this well-coordinated thing. I don't know how, in the heat of it, I had this fully reliable information streaming into my information ecosystem that, okay, so this is exactly what's going on. They're every bit as organized as they were on the 7th, right? So one moment I'm just riding the Sky Train as any other passenger. And then the next moment I see the one who is at least in my car. There's several in the other cars that I somehow see as well, even though I can't see into the other cars on the Sky Train. You can only see within the slot you're in. But somehow within the context of the dream, you know how these things are, it makes sense that I can see further away than I really can. So I have this expanded informational set. And I also somehow find out that it's every bit as well organized. And they're going to take down just as many Vancouverites, and I guess Vancouverite Jews, as they took on October 7th. And I have no way of exiting. He just shot one person. He just shot another person. He is absolutely merciless. It's just a matter of time now, unless you can just slide out of this window or break this door. And I couldn't do either. And then he shot me. And then once I got shot, I was like, ow. But at least I'm not having my head slit. That's pretty awesome. And then I don't know what happened, but now like something like 10 minutes ago, I'm high. I hadn't gotten high in a while, but I'm like, I had a fucking nightmare. I never have nightmares like these. At least that I can recount after getting high. And so, I don't know, maybe this is worth a mention from the standpoint of me being this, in the video, make the facts dance toward the beginning. Jesus, I don't know if I can clog that video further with this, but maybe I'll put it somewhere else. But I'm doing this empowerment, global jihad, anti-global jihad empowerment and counter-terrorism cheerleading. But like, why am I having dreams about being involved in an incident that I'm statistically unlikely to be involved in? But, I still, if I had my ways, one of the reasons to vote is UBI, but at the same time, another reason to vote is immigration. And, the clan that likes the UBI policy is not the clan that likes the immigration policy that I like. And this has not been that hard of a trade-off in the past, but in the future, maybe different. If I keep having nightmares about jihadists blowing me up in some kind of a place where I can't escape, and he's slowly making his way to me, if I keep having nightmares like these, it's like I'm gonna have to maybe even forswear a UBI package from the libs so I can vote me some cons. And even though I literally mean what I just said, no one should ever rule out voting for the other party that maybe they haven't voted for thus far in their life, to the extent that you're a lifelong voter to one party. Voting for the other party doesn't mean you're being ideologically inconsistent. There's the party affiliation, and then there's the political theory / ideology. These are different things. We can walk and chew gum at the same time, as I like to say. We can take note of these distinctions. The fact that so few people talk as if there's a distinction between the party affiliation and the theory, and seemingly claim to know about mid-20th century America, where you had the New York Republicans, Northern Republicans, and you had the Dixiecrats, right? That was such a fun period in American politics, because everyone who was involved in it understood. There's the theoretical, and then there's the facts on the ground make things change. And so people cross these party lines, and we're not accused of being inconsistent as a result. So even though what I just said, vote me some cons, that can be perceived as, like, what the hell are you doing? The cons have this wrong with them. The cons have that wrong with them. It's literally true. I would, like if the immigration thing gets too crazy. But the way I couched it with the whole dream, it's actually a dig at them. Because these studies, psychologically speaking, these studies shows that a lot of the subconscious fears drive that kind of thing. So me just weaving this dream story, and I didn't even mean to do it, but see how just seamlessly I weaved the dream story into insulting the cons. Here, trat cons. So like it's precisely that which is subconscious and bad, like the jihad nightmare, that causes me to consider even voting for the other party. I don't vote ever, and I probably will never vote, but it's just an interesting thing to note down. I wonder how many people would have caught that is in this seamless way. I didn't intend to relay the dream in order to take shots at them, but it is just remarkable that it's never actually some conservative who comes on and makes some arguments that sways, like, oh, I should have voted conservative all these years. It's when I have these subconscious negative things that I only catch on to, like a nightmare, that I only catch on to after I get high, that I start thinking, yeah, maybe, we'll see how bad the libs get on immigration, and maybe I'll not vote for them. But I never vote anyway, so it's all moot. I haven't voted since 2011. And if I could go back, I wouldn't have voted in 2011 either. But the last thing to note about the nightmare, in the past, when I had nightmares about people who I just know I couldn't sway, it can be a violent altercation, and you kind of try to play the calmer downer. You try to be the phlegmatic man in the violent altercation, and the person's armed. And it would just be that crushing feeling where it's like you just know that it just doesn't matter what you say. You're dealing with a fanatic. You're dealing with an impulsive person, so there's no way to sway them. So this is going to have to be a fight, and you know, they've got the weapons and you don't. You know, I've had nightmares that are kind of frightening of this sort in the past, not specifically involving jihadists, but it's been a while since I've had one. Here, I think we can summarize this as an extremely violent dream. The people, the fellow passengers in the SkyTrain car, I saw them get annihilated. I saw them get assassinated with this machete. He had the whole... I'll just flash the image to see what the jihadists look like instead of describing every article of clothing. But the thing is, I guess it had been that long since my last nightmare about involving some person who, if only I could sway them through articulation, you know, it could be a good outcome instead of a bad outcome. And that was crushing in those previous dreams, but now, like, the only thing that was bad was that I know I'm going to get killed, right? This crushing aspect of it, I guess I just deal with so many people who I'm resigned to them not being able to hear me the way they should, just in my day-to-day life, that even in the nightmare, like, God, it'd be so great if I could talk to the jihadists. Like, there was none of that. There was none of that. I just knew I had to either slide out the window or break open the door and essentially jump to my death, because the SkyTrains here are pretty... It's a good, you know, in some cases, it's a good 30, 40 feet off the ground. But I was like, I gotta jump out of this SkyTrain. Not for a single second. It's like, hey, Mr. Jihadist, have you considered not doing that? And have you considered maybe uploading some videos to YouTube, doing some fun rants, and looking to see if you can get someone to debunk you or something like that? No, none of that. It was just too many years of low expectations, and now knowing that I won't be understood, that's not even the crushing part. So maybe I'll relay a few more things about the nightmare, but that's it for now. I've departed outside, and I think it's one of those blissful opportunities to actually make it a hike. Still in the city, just departed, but yeah, I think I'm gonna go on a hike. I'm full of energy, and I don't think I have a single responsibility over the next 24 hours, but I've got a lot to vent about, and some points to make, actually. So for those of you who are more inclined toward the points, I've got some points to make. But first, I realize what this video's title is gonna be. I'm talking about jihadists, I'm talking about nightmares. I think this whole video needs to be titled The People Dying Channel, because that's the closest you're going to get to kind of sustained talk on all these morbid themes is here. Can you picture for a second, of all the weird specialty channels that have existed, I still can't process the fact that people watch these cooking shows and their entire 24/7 cooking channels like a franchise, like someone can be a franchise within the cooking world. channels devoted to that. Channels devoted to all kinds of weird stuff, but you'll never ever find what this video's title is. You'll never find the people dying channel. You'll never find people who are interested in the worst of life to just face it the way it should be faced. You know, people are patting themselves on the back for watching the October 7th recordings, and I say rightfully so. If you watched what the IDF has released or just the live streamed jihadist recordings, I say go ahead, pat yourself on the back. You're withstanding things you should withstand it to understand the day and why it's so damn evil. You got to watch that footage. If you haven't seen that footage, your commentary and your perspective on the day is incomplete. You may prescribe the right things in terms of policy or even in terms of certain attitudes, but you got to watch that, a very hard to watch footage. You got to watch it at least, you know, at least half of just what the IDF has released. You know, but even those of you who make it through that footage, you're not noticing how there's nothing like the people dying channel. Even though there's this diversity of weird, fringe, certainly interest groups. You know, interest groups have their own channels. Lobbyists have their own channels if you're seeing deeply enough. It's certainly, you know, specialty time devoted to their causes. But there's never been just the people dying channel. No one wants the camera in there. But in a way, if I'm dying, I'd kind of want the camera there because I'd want to see, you know, if you see the best of me, you should see the worst. So yeah, this video is, I'm probably going to keep it morbid, but just kind of, I think, maybe smack in the middle of it, because I've got a lot of other things I want to vent about, but just smack in the middle of it. I'm talking about death to a certain extent. I'm having nightmares about death, at least one type of horrific nightmare. And so, yeah, this is just going to be called the people dying channel. The stuff that I said about, you know, Christianity being a pessimistic religion, I had to expand on that, but that also gets into death a lot. And I think the doggy is not liking how loud I am, so I'm just going to head to the other direction. So there's all the proof you need that it's not always I whose loudness makes the dogs yelp and go away. Here the dogs bark, and it wasn't even that much of a bark, but it was a mean-looking dog, and it kind of made me yelp and discontinue. And looks like nothing much will come of my hiking prospects. Most I'll get is a seawall walk because this rainfall is just becoming a little too nuts. But yeah, I just want to reiterate that the people dying channel, it's not just that there's no demand for it the way there's a demand for all these weird channels. It's that you couldn't pay people enough to watch anything on the people dying channel because they just have these instinctive, unreflective aversions to the worst of life. But, you know, if you love life, you should be able to embrace the worst of life. There should be a people dying channel, but there isn't. All right. Oh, it looks like I'm being summoned as well. I'm being summoned to solve problems in concreto that I'm technically obligated to solve, but I don't want to solve any problems in concreto. I want to go for at least a seawall walk, if not a hike. But oh, I'm being summoned in real time. Why do I have any obligations? Must I? I am limited on time. I've also walked off the trail, physically speaking. I haven't just trailed off in terms of speaking. I've trailed off, literally. And I also don't have the time. I really wanted to rant about Remembrance Day. It's one of these things people get wrapped up in either negatively or positively when, in fact, they should be indifferent. They shouldn't deride those who partake in it for the right reasons, who may be there to socially signal, but who also have somehow managed to tether this genuine feeling when they think about the previous troops who died and made sacrifices. You know, but then all troops make sacrifices, right? The Nazi, the Stalinist troop, the Maoist troops, they all also made sacrifices. But so it's like you're extending it to certain people who made the sacrifices, specifically in the regions where you were happy those regions prevailed. Maybe it's only the region you live if you're particularly parochial. But, you know, we extend this deep gratitude. It's supposed to be properly felt. It's not supposed to be feigned. That's what Remembrance Day is all about. It's not about this poppy and controversy, this exhibitive stuff that Don Cherry wants you to care about. No, Remembrance Day is supposed to be, you know, whether you can muster that deeply felt, sincerely felt appreciation and gratitude for those troops who sacrificed a lot in the past. And, you know, maybe the current existence of the nation you're enjoying hinges specifically on certain cluster of individuals who chose to make those kinds of sacrifices. And boy, don't you want to say something about it at least once a year? And don't we all as a group want to say something about it? And so I'm saying that you shouldn't dislike those people, but you shouldn't necessarily hop on board. You should be indifferent to this stuff. And then if someone tugs you into it, if someone weaves you into it, then go from indifferent to ambivalent. Don't be pro or anti-poppy, but just point out that certain people like Don Cherry, boy, do they get riled up when someone is not properly exhibitive. But I'm like, just what does that person actually believe? What does that person actually contribute to society in the ways I care about specifically? You know, all I'll say in critique of Remembrance Day is that all troops, you know, to whatever extent the individual troop was giddy about the prospects of joining the military and then joined it, that kind of measures their own view of their own individual disposability. So it's like, we have to at least bite this one bullet if we're going to be pro Remembrance Day. It's like, what makes a troop, what makes a courageous person in many instances is to one or another extent, the extent to which they view themselves as disposable for some greater ideal, some greater cause. This is conjoined many a fanatic, and it can be seen in many a troop. Given what troops actually believe, when you drill down on like the military personnel, what these people actually believe, it's like, I don't know. They're all strangers to me, so I don't want to make too many positive or negative assumptions about perfect strangers. They may have more to them than what they actually believe politically. Military doesn't swing in my directions politically, aside from maybe immigration. I'll talk about that more later, or I've talked about it thus. But now I guess I am saying things about Remembrance Day. This was supposed to be a short thing. I said I snipped something from Twitter. I want to read out what I snapped from Twitter. God, I can't believe I went on the Remembrance Day rant. There was something else to that, actually. But I'm low on time, so I'll add the something else when I'm not low on time. But for now, I just want to read out the thing that I snapped from Twitter. Hello, doggy. That I'll just try to ignore. Let me just pull up that note. So the guy from Twitter wrote this. I copied and pasted it, so I don't have the actual Twitter snap. But it says there is a solution to the root cause of the conflict. He speaks here about Muslim versus Jew, what people formally call Israel versus Palestine, but what I like to kind of repeatedly drill into my listeners, the Muslim and Jew conflict. So he writes, there's a solution to the root cause of the conflict. Over the past 50 years, proposals to end the Arab-Israeli conflict have specified one or both of the following preconditions. Number one, the Islamic nations must recognize Israel's right to exist in peace in the region. Number two, Israel must return the Gaza and West Bank areas to Arabs. Islamic and Jewish political leaders understood that accepting these preconditions violated the following essential aspects of Islamic and Jewish religious traditions. Number one, Muhammad's final command that only one religion must occupy the Arabian Peninsula. Two, Moses' final command that the Israelites must occupy their God-given inheritance, including Gaza and the West Bank. Until this complex equation is solved, Jewish and Islamic political leaders must negotiate in bad faith to avoid the fatal consequences of making unpopular decisions. Both sides knew this, but allowed third parties to push them into making agreements that their populations could never agree to. The obvious solution is to resolve the conflicting religious issues with preconditions. This finally allows the political leaders the freedom to negotiate in good faith. Please consider the following solution, and then you see that link. That link will be in the low bar too. And now to conclude this wretched video with crows. They're seizing upon me. It sounds like it. God. You know, they're more than any other beast, the crow sounds like it's closer to you than it actually is every time you turn back around. Because there was a period there in the 2010s, especially May, June, man, they went for it. That's why I ended up with tracks called Crow Spots Your Eye Out, Crow Chunks Your Eye Out, Crow something. Maybe Crow Eats Your Eye Out. And now there's a lot of crows. But it's apropos, it's a wretched video that'll now have to be its own video I can't put this anywhere else, so not 4, but 5 video differential. As I go on to say, YouTube is dumpster fire in terms of how many videos I've had to delay it for. It's 5 videos. It's an audio addiction, folks. And so the dream was horrendous. I won't relay more things about it. It's unnecessary. Eating up precious time. I just want to point out, you know, if you were going to do the Nietzschean thing on me, the infinite rebirths and infinite re-existences, if you were going to do the Nietzschean thing on me, it had a formal name. I'm thinking, would that be justified or not? Would that make me giddy, or would that straight up petrify me? And I think the correct answer to that is it depends what night of the week it is. If it's one of these nights where it's one of my nights off, and that's one of the recurring, so that happens 3 nights out of the week. I hope in my future it contains 4 and 5 and 6 and eventually 7 nights out of the week that's going to be workless nights. Because if I get to a point where every night is a workless night, yes, you can do the Nietzschean thing on me. But insofar as there's these work nights, it's like certain nights are lit up and certain ones are gloomy and near pitch dark. They just have these little glimmers of light when I step out to an abandoned lot. Other than that, it's darkness. So you can do the Nietzschean thing on me insofar as it's only on those nights of the week that I get to be non-occupational and that I actually get to do what I love to do, because I've been awake for 48 hours. Over 40. I don't know, certainly over 40, maybe as many as 48 hours now, but it's my nights off, so it doesn't matter. I'm just gonna have to hope that I can sleep during work. But yeah, insofar as like everything's so bright and insistent upon my attention, I can't sleep. It's been this way for the last month or so. I just have these way past 24-hour periods of sleeplessness. Now it's extended to over 40 insofar as I've got these nights off. These are the times that, yes, you can reinsert me into with eternal recurrence. It's those nights that I'm off work. And has anyone thought of it that way, where you get to pick and choose pockets of your life? With me, it'd be this work, non-work stuff. Okay, well, apropos as well, the crows, I've fled them. But I'm an audio addict though, you must respect my needs and vanity.
Well, this video is ready to go. This video is ready to go. That's the segment. Crows might be dangerous, but you know what? I'm going... I always have last minute things that I like to add before I finally post a video. And it's about the crow stuff, so I figured, well, I don't want to sound like an ignoramus. I should do a bit of research to find out why they attack. And sure enough, the first thing, and it seems like it is regional, because my search results are not regionally filtered, but the first thing that cropped up on this case, it's, yeah, a bunch of lower mainland, and then especially Vancouver residents complaining about the crows. Coincidentally, the news segment is from 6 months ago, so what I said about May, June, yeah, it's still a problem, and they're still going for it. They were only going for it like in the 2010s as far as my anecdotal experience is concerned, but yeah, there's a lot of people who said they went nuts this past spring. And it's so Canadian, the news segment. But yeah, this is the first thing that cropped up, and it's I'm not going crazy. And of course, it's to do with procreation. They attack because they're mommies and daddies. You know, just like actual human mommies and daddies go a little berserk because they're so protective, and it stunts their minds. Likewise with crows. Crows are overprotective. Come on. Why won't it play?
It's crow attack season. All over the lower mainland, people are getting swooped, swiped, dive bombed. They're getting beaked up, and they're beaking off.
It was so intense. I was terrified. Yeah, they just dived down, like got the back of my neck, and then his like wings were like flapping in my hair.
End. Let's go to the end.
So if you're in the crosshairs of these protective parents, the advice is to change your habits to stay away from nesting spots, or carry an umbrella, and have a bit of sympathy for these poor crows. Anyone raising little ones will tell you that parenting is murder. In Britain, CBC News, Vancouver.
Yeah, so totally Canadian.